lime and scale buildup that you see all over wherever water is touched and then evaporated out doesn't build up in the inside of your tank. Also, it helps with that, minimize that. You had a question? Who has the mic?
Okay, so I found out with our new water heater,
Yep.
it has a rotator in there, so it doesn't, so
Okay.
the sediment doesn't sit on the bottom all the
That's
time.
good. Yep.
That makes a difference. I'm
It
assuming
does,
right?
and like I
Okay.
said, there's little design differences and whatnot, but I kind of go by the basic old school of you don't have that. So I think with those it's just basically a thing on the bottom that when that water goes in, it just swirls that water around to help with that. So, but again, if you turn that water off, it's not doing that, right? So that's where I play around with that water a little bit off and on, and I'll just let it run and make it so that that's running clear, and make sure that there's nothing jammed up inside of that. Turn that thing back on. If you can't open that valve, don't even bother with it. You're going to end up getting a new water heater or paying a plumber to come out to be able to change that valve out. So, I mean, is it next to impossible to do? No, not really. Really, it's a twist out. But that's one of those things where, I mean, these are spun in there. It can be a bit of a grouch to get out, though. So that's one of those things. So yeah, as far as flushing it out, that's really it. That's really the maintenance on it. So where people start to have other questions are, we'll talk about the draft style. You have this metal pipe coming up, right? It's going into the chimney. When I'm doing a water heater flush, I'm going to check that to make sure that that's actually drafting. And the reason I say that is you can get a blockage in that line. You can get carbon monoxide starting to dump out of this. And the easiest way to do it is to run your hot water right to make this thing kick on. And you can hold like even a lighter, but some people get like an incense stick or something like that and put it on there, and it should be pulling right in, right? If it's not, if it's actually pushing out, or if you see on the top here, you might see black marks, and that can indicate that you have some kind of a blockage going on. I've seen it where a bird or whatever is falling in there and is, somewhere up in the pipe. I mean, back to another one we were working on, it had a blockage of some sort, so we started pulling the vent pipe out, and there was like a crook right in this area. There was a bunch of bird bones in there. So I don't want to think about what those birds are doing, hanging out like it's nice and warm or whatever in the winter, and then. But yeah, water heaters, they really can mess with you. Any water heater that uses a natural gas or propane can have that carbon monoxide. So I want to make sure they're drafting good. So I'm looking at see with that smoke, or if I'm noticing those marks. At that point, I would be calling somebody out if I do notice that it's not wanting to draft up, or I'm seeing a lot of those slit marks radiating out from this inner part here. That makes sense? Okay. With these other older style draft styles, a lot of times that's an older style water heater. So what people will do is they'll say, I'm spending all this money to lose this heat when I'm not needing the hot water. So they'll go out and they'll buy like a water heater wrap or something along that line, right? That's fine. If you're going to do that, please read the instructions. I've seen it where people have put them too close to this, and this is hot, and it melts or catches fire. I've also seen it where they have the opening down here, and they said there's some old styles out there, and I don't know if you guys can see this or not. I can't pick up the water. So. This here is where the burner is. This is the burner assembly. In the older styles, it is just flat out open, right? It doesn't have a sealed door. And I've seen it where people have covered that up. If you read the instructions, it says don't get anywhere near that. And I've seen it where people wrap it around and that flame is, exposed in a sense. It's just this big old thing and it catches that insulation on fire. And then you have a nice torch in your basement. So a lot of them now are these sealed units, though. But there are still some out there that are those old styles where you can reach right in there and, access that. So yeah, if you're putting that on, please keep that stuff in mind. The other thing that people will do is they'll say, I can wrap my pipes, right? And there's nothing wrong with that until you do something like this. And they say, I'm going to wrap this. See an issue with this? Right. This, right. It is going to melt on you, right? So details, right? If you have that style, fine, you can insulate your pipes that way. You don't need to have it right next to it. I think the code now is something along 6 inches or something as far as anything that's combustible. And sometimes that even can be PEX can be one of those where it's weird. I've seen it where people have put PEX right next to these. Is definitely within that 6-inch mark. It's definitely closer than that. And I've seen it where inspectors have said, yep, it's good. I've also seen it where inspectors are like, no, it has to be a metal braided or copper or something along that line until it veers off, right? So details like that. The other thing is that sometimes you don't even need these. And there is a really simple way to be able to tell that. Put your hand on top. With the old style ones, and if that, depending on what the temperature is, there's all these little things. But if you put your hand on that thing and it feels hot, yeah, it might be a time to get a wrap on it to be able to hold that insulation, to be able to hold that heat. The newer tanked units have built-in thicker insulation. So I can put my hand on these newer ones, same temperature water, you barely feel it. At that point, you're just wasting money buying a blanket. It's not really doing anything because the insulation's built in. So does that make sense? All right. So those things to keep in mind. Another thing that has a tendency to leak, I would say, is the spots up here, right? And, if you have a lot of corrosion or something like that, that's another indication that you might want to start, holding off on, buying whatever so you can spend money on a water heater. Because these are spun on, right? But there is what's called, it's called a dielectric union. And I wish I had one, but I don't. But basically what the problem is that you will get something like copper and put it on this, and you have two different metals, and they're going to react to each other, and they're going to corrode. The dielectric union makes it so that it's kind of a break with that. It's a metal that's not going to interact with the iron or the copper or whatever. So, and again, you see a lot of them out there because, yeah, you can run that on. As a homeowner, say, I can go out and get a whatever I need and go ahead and spin that thing on, and it's going to work, but is it going to corrode over time? Probably. So things like that, right? And if you have heavy corrosion or heavy buildup, you're going to have. You've all seen a car battery where it has that corrosion built up around it. It sort of looks like that. So if you start seeing something like that around there, that's the issue. And, it's one of those things that can be fixed. If your water heater is in decent shape, yeah, you can call a plumber out and they'll be able to put that union on. Or something that won't have those two dissimilar metals reacting with each other. The other is this is what's called a pressure relief valve. And what this does is it is exactly what it sounds like. If this tank gets up too much pressure, it's going to blow out. Usually it has a pipe connecting that's running down and hanging off the floor a couple inches, right? Usually like a copper pipe. And what will happen is I'll show this to you guys. If you pull this, it's got a little seal in there, that little rubber seal, and you can play with it. I'll talk to you guys while I'm doing this. I got another one right here. I'll pass that back. But what will happen is that seal sometimes doesn't want to sit properly. Usually it's kids. I always pick on kids because they're like, ooh, and they're like flicking this thing and stuff, right? And, that seal may sit cockeyed. You don't want to drip, drip, drip water, right? So if that's going on, what you can do is, what I do is, if I notice water coming dripping out of that pipe, the bottom of that pipe, about 2 inches off the floor, I'm going to go first, I'm going to just flick this. I'm not going to open it all the way up because you'll dump water all over the place, but I'll flick it a couple of times. And it will make it so that sometimes that seal will seat better and then stop leaking because it can get bumped. Kids can play with it, whatever, right? If that doesn't work, yeah, you can buy one of these and replace it. Now, with that, if you are going to do that, it is simply, a pair of pliers like this will usually get that thing off. Shut that thing down and let it cool off. Again, these tanks build up pressure. And think of it like a radiator, right? If you immediately open it up, there's a chance that it can come squirting out at you. Also, you're going to, I'd shut it off, let it sit for a couple hours. Water's probably still going to be warm, and then you're going to have to drain it because, that tank, that water is sitting up in this range. So you can drain it down a little bit. You shut your water off, drain it down a little bit, get it down below that, spin that thing out, take it down to your plumbing house or whatever. Say, this is what I need. Have the model number on your tank water heater also. That's going to help. But I think they're regular generic. Put your pipe dope, thread, whatnot on it. Put it in there. Hand tighten it, and then tighten it back up. Make it so it's, yeah, it's Teflon tape or pipe dope. Some people use both. It's called pipe dope. Dope. Yeah, it's like a Teflon paste. Some people will put that Teflon tape on and then that pipe dope also. I have a tendency to just use pipe dope. I've never had an issue with it, but again, depending on what plumber you're talking to, some like to do both. And trick with that is when you're putting it in, I'm always going to turn it counterclockwise a little bit just so it doesn't cross thread. And I'm also going to not fight with it. I'm going to hand thread it in so I don't cross thread it because it is being grouchy. There it goes. So you hand thread it, and if you can't turn it, don't force it. Those first couple turns, and then you can go ahead and get your pair of pliers on it, and just keep turning that thing. And obviously, you want this thing pointing down when you're done. Turn everything back on, fill it back up, check it for leaks. You're good, right? So that's a relatively easy thing. And that's one of those, just depends on what your comfort level is. The other is, there's what's called an anode rod in some of the units. So on top here, you may see what looks like this giant nut, right? And it is basically a sacrificial rod that the water will attack instead of your tank. So what will happen is that if you have one of these and you haven't changed one of those out in however long, right, you can get a socket set, and I would probably suggest a relatively long bar so you have some leverage. And, all the same rules apply. Shut it down, let it cool down, all that sort of stuff. break that, pull that thing out. You may pull it out, it may look like this. It may just have just that tip on it because it's been completely dissolved, right? And you can go down to the plumbing supply house and say, I need a new anode rod, and be able to put that in. So that's what that is. So
I have a question.
Yeah.
Why does the water attack the tank?
That's a good question, and I don't know. Hard water is a bear. Oh, I know that. But I mean, yeah, that's a question I don't know. I can find out. But it does. So, all right. All right. Of the tank, that's that drain valve on the bottom down here. Yeah, that's what I went through. Oh, if I have time, I'll go through it again about that. Okay. So that's this style. Does that make sense as far as the heat coming off of this, and you want to make sure that it's drafting up that vent, not getting anything too close to it. That's going to melt or catch fire. Same for the non-sealed units down here. Another detail with these is it's not a good idea to have clothes and junk and boxes laying all around this thing. It pulls in fresh air. So you want your water heater to work properly, don't have a bunch of junk around it. Give it a 2 foot, 3 foot space, right? Because I've come down and seen laundry piled all around it. It's like, so keep an area clear, please. Now, as far as I will pick on electric. There are electric ones out there, and yes, those can be replaced. The electric ones, this is, like I said, this is a gas. The electric ones, a lot of times, are going to have a panel on the side. Obviously, you disconnect the sucker from your circuit breaker, and you're going to have these guys in there, and that's what heats that water up instead of the flame. And yes, these are replaceable. You have a couple wires going to them. Basically, it's 2 wires. Pull them out. They can be a bit grouchy because, again, they're just going to get corroded and everything. But yes, those elements can be replaced on those electric water heaters. Not many people have those electric water heaters, but I will say this: a big movement right now is to get away from natural gas or propane, and they're trying to switch a lot of these new homes to fully electric, and therefore the chances of running into those is increasing over time. So
what about solar water heaters?
Not a clue. I'll be honest with you. I don't know. I mean, I've seen them, with the up on the roof, and you have the tubes that go through and it heats them up. I've seen those systems where they do kind of a preheat, and then that gets dumped into your tank, so it's just not heating up as much. Beyond that, don't know. So, as far as other issues that come up with these, I'm not going to use that. I'm actually going to use this. So this is the assembly, right? This is the old style here. Pilot, standing pilot, all this sort of stuff. You don't run into these too often. But you do have, you still have what's called a thermocouple. That's what this one is here. And what that does is it senses the flame, okay? And it makes it so that this gas valve can open up. What will happen is that this gets sooted really bad. So it used to be a lot easier. It used to be you shut it off, you reach in there, right? You disconnect this guy, and you would just pull him out like this, and replace it. because sometimes, like I said, it just doesn't sense that. There's two different metals in there and it senses that flame. And they will just have a tendency to go out occasionally. Get a new style or a new one. Looks like that. And you can put that in. That is one of the older styles, okay? A trick with that is that sometimes it's just sooted up enough to where just the soot on it is causing it not to work properly. So you can shut everything down, let it cool off, reach in there with steel wool or real fine sandpaper or something like that, and clean that off a little bit. And it will be enough to be able to make it run again. So changing out those, it's not that difficult. You got this little threaded part here. These are a lot of times reverse threads. It depends. So you want to look at it and carefully try to, you're always going to start going counterclockwise to unscrew it. Sometimes that is not the case. Sometimes it is what's called a reverse thread. So it's righty, loosey, lefty, tighty instead of the other way around. So if you have one of these and you have that issue where it's just not wanting, that burner's just not wanting to stay on, that's usually the case if they have one of these thermocouples in there. So some of them have, this is a more modern burner assembly, and one is an igniter, doesn't necessarily have a standing pilot. This is like a glow stick, glows real bright, burner kicks on. But then you have this part here is the flame sensor, but it looks like this. So like I said, little different assembly or parts in it. Same deal with this. You can clean that off also. So if you have this, if you have one of these sealed units, that's what this is. And you think that's something that is going on, that flame just does not want to stay on, that's usually the easiest thing to check is that flame sensor. And you can, gently pop that off, pull this out. Obviously, you're going to shut everything down first and take a look at it. The thing is that you have one that is see, in this case, they're both together. So you have your igniter and your flame sensor. I don't know if in furnaces, sometimes they have duals where it's going to be the flame sensor and the igniter in one piece. The thing to keep in mind with that is that you don't want to touch the igniter with your bare hands. So if you have a system like this and you want to go ahead and change that out, great. Wear nitro gloves, because the oil from your hand will make that burn extra hot right in that one spot and make it burn out quick. It's just like old halogen bulbs. So, but like I said, that's one of those things that is not necessarily that difficult to change. You're talking about unplugging this thing and getting this pulled out. If you look on here, there's a little bracket. I'll pass this guy around. There's a little bracket on there. You just take that screw out and it will come out. So those are the things that you can really, kind of do on your own. Yes, some of them are a little more advanced than the others. The gas valve and stuff like that, please don't mess with those. It's just not worth it. The other is the other style of water heater is what's called a power vent water heater. Take this guy off. So a power vent water heater will have a unit just like this. It will sit on top, right? And the thing plugs in. And it usually has PVC pipe running out of it, just like coming out of the furnace over there, and it running out the rim joist or wherever and outside the house. Those are nice because they make sure that they're going to pull. There's a fan inside here, and it's going to pull all that nasty gas and expel it out of the house, right? There are little details about this, though. There's a little off switch back here. And I've seen it where somebody calls the plumber because their water heater's not working. Because if this is in the off position, nothing turns on. And the plumber goes, "You're good." So, yeah, if you have one of these and it's not doing anything, start with the simplest thing. Make sure this thing is plugged in. You got power to the outlet, that sort of stuff. Yeah, it's turned on. The other is that you have these tubes, and I've seen it where sometimes this tube gets disconnected. Spin this guy around so you can see it a little better. I'll get this guy off. I've seen it where this gets disconnected, and yeah, at that point, it's not going to reach a certain negative pressure to be able to tell the gas valve, yeah, you can go ahead and kick on. So, if you have a power vent style like this, just familiarize yourself with it, how it looks while it's working. And then, find out where the turn off switch is, pay attention to these tubes and where they go and what they're connected into. Past that point, it's if something's going wrong with it. Can they change out the top? I imagine they could. I don't know how much it would be. At that point, is it worth getting a new tank or not? So it's things like that. But power vent is just basically just that. Bad part about all that is that you need power to run. So that's where those old tanked water heaters are nice, because you didn't need any power to run. As long as you had gas to them, they'd go. These, you lose power, you lose hot water. So, but everything else is pretty much the same with these, but power vent is just a different style. All right, let's see. I am going to look and make sure. These are all in your basement, I imagine. Anybody got a water heater like this on the main level of their house? Okay. I will say this. A lot of times, especially if they're in a main part of the home, sitting on wood floors usually, they'll have a big pan that they sit in with a drain line running off somewhere. That's a good idea, because you can have leaks. You can have really small leaks in these things. Bottom of the tank starts going, whatever, right? And you can have rot going on underneath the feet of these. And I've seen it where these things have all of a sudden rotted the floor, and you got 40 gallons of water. Do the math, however much that weighs, a lot, right? And it starts to and break the floor, because that floor has been soaked for so long. And then depending on what style it is, back to that vent style, it could pull that vent a little bit and make it so it's dumping carbon monoxide in to your house. So if you have one, that is on a surface that can potentially be rotted out, ask for it to be put in a pan. And so usually that's required, but you can put these things in yourself also. But that's one of those things as a homeowner, you have to be able to live with whatever it is that you've done. So the other part, I want to say this real quick, is you may see two copper lines going up, and you may see a copper wire, usually about that big, running, maybe connected to your gas line and connected to one of the water lines. It's called a bonding. If it had that before, please put that back on. And if that is getting inspected, inspectors know to keep an eye out for that. But that's what that's for. That's part of your electrical system as far as the grounding goes, because there can be stray voltage that varies to your to your water lines or to your gas lines, and that's what that helps bond all that together to the grounding rod that's outside. So that you may see a lot of times they have that wire somewhere up top above that water heater. So that bonding wire, grounding wire is what you want. You want that put back on. Now, tanked water heaters. This is where we're going to go do a quick. I'll talk about this real quick, and then we'll walk upstairs and we'll show you as far as the maintenance on those go. Page 6 shows the tankless water heater. Tankless water heaters are really nice. They are just what they sound like. There is no tank whatsoever. They don't hold hot water. All they do is they heat it up as needed. So you turn on a hot water valve and it's somewhere in your house, and that water is running through. And in this case, it's, gas style. It's using quite a bit of gas while it is running, but for the most part, it just sits there. And it's not keeping 40 plus gallons of water at whatever temperature you have it set at. And that's where it saves you money. The thing to think about with the tankless water heaters are, and you can see the picture, and that's a relatively good representation. You open that thing up and it looks like the inside of a German sub. Just nuts. I mean, you go, So is it, user friendly to the typical homeowner? Usually not, right? So if something goes wrong, yeah, you're calling somebody out, usually, to be able to deal with that. The other issue is that, let's say you're at a box store and you see, there's a tankless water heater. Great, I want that one. And people will have them put in and stuff, but they don't think about the gallons per minute. So the units are designed to be able to heat a certain amount of water up a certain degree, to a certain temperature, right? It depends on how cold the water is coming in and all that sort of stuff and what you have it set at. But it boils down to gallons per minute. And why is that important? So what they will do, if you're interested in a tankless water heater, is they're going to walk through your house and they're going to say, you have, 2 bathrooms. Each one has, 2 tubs. They're going to go through all the faucets in your house that have the ability to give hot water. And each one has a certain amount of gallons per minute that's going to be able to run through that thing. And they will add that all up. And they'll say, your house, if you were to have every single hot, valve on in your home, including your washing machine, your dishwasher, all that stuff, right? You're going to be going through this many gallons per minute. So they size that unit to get close to that number, right? If it's undersized, what do you think happens? That it just can't keep up. The other thing is that, so you want them sized correctly. The other thing is that when that water is running through, it uses a lot of gas. So sometimes half-inch line like this won't work. You may need upwards of a 1-inch line. And that may require work on your gas line, switching it over to, or getting it back to closer to the main that's a little larger. So sometimes it's not just a simple, and then 2, you have to vent that thing. And there's a couple of different styles out there and how it's vented. So is it kind of a user friendly as far as a homeowner putting them in? Usually not. But that money that you save, as long as you understand some of those basics of it, and you get the right unit for the family size and how many gallons per minute you can possibly use, it's great. Teenagers, all that sort of stuff. My wife and I just broke down and got one, and it's been really nice because I could take a 20-minute shower if I want, and she can jump in next and still have all the hot water you need. So, tankless water heaters are great. You just have to understand a few things about them. Let's go ahead and head up, and we'll show you as far as how to flush out these tankless water heaters. No.
Before we do that, I'm going to close out the live stream really quick so that they don't have to wait.
They're just sitting there looking at it.
Yeah, I know, they're just like, thank you for joining us. We're going to wrap up our live stream for the water heater maintenance course. Please check out our schedule for upcoming events, and you all have schedules too, so I'll review that with you later. And come join us again.
All right. It's all right. No, you're fine.
Quick comment on your calendar. It says the dates are different. It says Tuesday, October 15th, Tuesday, October 16th. For the bottom there, yes, so I didn't know. 15th is a Tuesday, and then the Wednesday. Oh, that's like the second.
Oh, I don't need this thing anymore, do I? Thank you.
Anything on the stream,